think you know Adolf Hitler. You've never seen him like this before. Hitler's contemporaries, from his birth in Braunau to his death in the bunker, authentically flesh out the picture. Who was Hitler? Hitler neither finished school nor had any vocational training. He occasionally lived in homeless shelters or on the street. He refused to pursue a regular job. To this day, it seems inexplicable that he could come to power. Out of nowhere, Hitler became the Führer, leader of the German Reich, one of the most powerful men of the 20th century, starting an inferno that engulfed the world and brought death to millions of people. The nation worshipped him and followed him blindly into the abyss. But during his lifetime, he kept his origins and his life secret. No one should know how or who he was. Fascinating and oppressive accounts from companions, friends, and enemies, as well as the most extensive collection of archive material ever shown. Much of it, hitherto unpublished, reveal who Hitler was and how he could become what he was. A notorious liar and an unscrupulous murderer. Under the protection of the Hitler-Stalin Pact, Hitler invades Poland. Great Britain and France immediately declare war on Germany. Despite all the warnings, this comes as a surprise for Hitler. He is unsure of himself, but the rapid occupation of Poland restores his self-confidence. The continuing passivity of the Western Allies encourages him to go further. After the occupations of Denmark and Norway, he invades the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. Great Britain is stunned. The British army is defeated and has to flee head over heels via Dunkirk. Hitler's confidence rises to immeasurable heights, but his next steps will have fatal consequences.
Führer spoke at length and in detail about the ongoing incorporation of the former provinces of Posen and West Prussia. The social strata thought to be racially valuable could be Germanized. In principle, they would have to look racially pure and have the right hereditary disposition. A special cultural heritage group would be created. Here, language would be the most important factor. He said he wasn't interested in the Polish intelligentsia, as they were the supporters of Polish nationalism. Gerhard Engel, army adjutant to Hitler, memoirs in diary form.
Heinrich Himmler's pocket diary. Berlin, office, post-briefing, 13 minutes. 11 a.m., leave for Plock. 1 p.m., land in Plock, drive to Mlawa. Dinner and overnight stay there. Rudolf Brandt, SS Colonel.
The Poles are not a people to form a state. I traveled back and forth across the country with the Reichsführer SS. A country with so little idea of the essence of settlement has no claim to independent power in the European sphere. It is a colonial country. Hans Jost, writer, president of the Reich Literature Chamber.
If a German passed by, a Pole had to step off the sidewalk. A Pole could not travel by automobile or trolley and was even forbidden to own a bicycle. He had been placed completely outside protection of the law. And all his property, movable or immovable, was at the disposal of the German authorities. Jan Karski, courier of the Polish underground.
Diary, Tuesday, April the 9th, 1940. Nasty weather. Housework and errands in the morning. Learn that the Germans have marched into Denmark and Norway. God knows what comes next. Otto Blumenthal, Jewish-German mathematician, in exile, Utzulen, near Utrecht.
After the war, we'll have to ask the English how they could claim on a daily basis to rule the waves when Germany was able to land troops in 6 different places in Norway. Friedrich Kellner, court employee, Laubach.
Diary, Wednesday, April the 10th, 1940. Contradictory news from Norway. Naval battle at Narvik. Otto Blumenthal.
After the surrender of Norway on June the 10th, 1940, the German Army, Navy and Air Force stationed up to 400,000 servicemen in this country with less than 3.5 million inhabitants. The Norwegians are forced to supply whatever the occupiers need. In a race against the British, Norway has been occupied for economic reasons and because the German Navy wants to control the Norwegian coastline to prevent a British blockade. From 1942 onwards, the German army divisions are not particularly strong. Above all, they are used to secure the supply of Swedish iron ore via the port of Narvik against an Allied invasion.
From all this wreckage and confusion, there emerged one fact of major importance potentially affecting the whole future of the war. In their desperate grapple with the British Navy, the Germans ruined their own, such as it was, for the impending climax. Winston Churchill, the Second World War.
Diary, April the 11th, 1940. Visited Saarbrücken, the Spiechener Heights, the bullet-ridden villages of no man's land. Abandoned old French trenches with mattresses and blankets. Endless bunker construction. Houses in the village, piles of rubble, hanging walls full of holes. If one day the whole West looked like this, it would be horrible. Alfred Rosenberg, Director of the Foreign Policy Office of the NSDAP.
I tried to read in the faces of the thousands what was in their minds this Easter day. But their faces looked blank. Obviously, they do not like the war, but they will do what they're told. Die, for instance. William Shira, reporter for Columbia Broadcasting System.
At lunchtime on May the 9th, we left Berlin in great secrecy and travelled at first light towards Hamburg, turned the train around and arrived in Aachen at 3 a.m. Under a beautiful starry sky, we went by car to the command post of the Führer's headquarters, the Felsennest or Rocky Eyrie. Wilhelm Keitel, Supreme High Commander of the Armed Forces, Memoirs.
Hitler gathered his small executive staff and announced in a firm, clear voice that the offensive against France had begun that morning. The first birds were chirping in the dewy bushes, and in the distance, we could hear the thunder of artillery. Christa Schröder, Hitler's private secretary.
On May the 10th, 1940, the opponent mounted a big offensive. 10 tank and 6 motorized divisions rolled towards the west in 2 groups. On the downward slope to which we had been mistakenly led, our army, the government, and the whole of France now plunged with dizzying speed to its ruin. And yet there were 3,000 modern French tanks and 800 machine guns mounted on trucks. The Germans didn't have more than that either. Charles de Gaulle, Tank Division Commander, Memoirs.
Diary, May the 10th, 1940. The final battle is beginning and will decide the fate of Germany, probably forever, definitely for centuries. The Dutch have now been agitating against us for 7 years and have let in all immigrants. They were just interested in doing business and were bosom friends to all the Jews in the world. Alfred Rosenberg.
In the first Armed Forces report at noon on May the 10th, I had recorded the sentence, "The Führer has personally taken over supreme command of the German army operating in the West." I wrestled with him for half an hour over the approval of this publication. He declared he wanted to remain anonymous and not diminish the glory for the generals. I did not let up, and in the end he gave in. Wilhelm Keitel.
Transcript of talks between Admiral Darlan and the Führer at Obersalzberg. The Führer emphasized that he didn't have the ambition to become a great commander, but more importantly to protect the cultural and social rise of the German nation as the Führer of its people. Others had insisted he become commander.
He was the revolutionary spirit and the pulsating element of the German army and its great organizational machinery. He knew its tendency to exaggerated thoroughness, against which he tirelessly fought. Otto Dietrich, head of press of the NSDAP.
Hitler took the credit for the success of the Western campaign. Albert Speer.
The Western campaign of 1940 revealed another of Hitler's character traits. He was very bold in the creation of his plans. Norway was a courageous plan. The tank breakthrough equally so. But when the first difficulties arose, in contrast to his unshakable persistence in the face of political difficulties, he would vacillate in military questions because he instinctively sensed his lack of ability in this field. Heinz Guderian, Lieutenant General, Armored Corps.
Diary, Friday, May the 10th, 1940. Now the war has really begun. Chamberlain has stepped down and Churchill replaced him. One bad person has left and a much worse one has come. Henrietta Schneider, housekeeper, East Prussia.
Thus, then, on the night of the 10th of May, at the outset of this mighty battle, I acquired the chief power in the state. I cannot conceal that I was conscious of a profound sense of relief. I felt as if I were walking with destiny, and that all my past life had been but a preparation for this hour and for this trial. Winston Churchill.
Diary, Saturday, May the 11th, 1940. If I had to spend my whole life with a man, I would choose Mr. Chamberlain. But I think if there was a storm and I was shipwrecked, I would sooner have Mr. Churchill. He has a funny face, like a bulldog in our street. Nella Last, Barrow-in-Furness, Lancashire.
Winston is a dictator. He cannot be overruled, and his colleagues fear him. The people have set him up as something little less than God, and his power is therefore terrific. Robert Menzies, Prime Minister of Australia, from 1939 to 1941.
Diary, Tuesday, May the 21st, 1940. Our armies are 130 kilometers from Paris. We've reached the Channel. Henrietta Schneider.
The English are an amazing nation, and I think it is true that nothing becomes them like catastrophe. When they are really up against it, their negative qualities turn positive in a glorious somersault. Slowness, understatement, complacency change into endurance and pride, the begetter of self-discipline. Martha Gellhorn, war correspondent of the US Army.
The well-trained English army appears to be finished for the most part. One would do well to have a small flask of morphine handy. One might need it. Stefan Zweig, Austrian writer, in exile, Bath, England.
May the 23rd, 1940. We've done it. The Air Force is destroying the English on the beach. I was able to persuade Hitler to stop the army. The Führer wants this to be a lesson for them. Hans Jeschonek, Chief of the General Staff of the Air Force to Erhard Milch, State Secretary of the Aviation Ministry.
Diary. Friday, May the 24th, 1940. The ring is tightening around the enemy armies in northern France. Henrietta Schneider.
May the 26th, 1940, Dunkirk. By order of the very highest level, the tank and motorized units are standing on the heights and are not allowed to attack. There is an understandable nervousness on the part of the commander-in-chief of the army, because waiting for orders from on high when the back of the enemy is open to attack is incomprehensible. Franz Halder, Chief of the General Staff of the Army.
Memoirs in diary form, May the 27th, 1940. The Field Marshal landed. Discussion with the Führer. Göring announced success in Dunkirk harbor, saying,
"Only trawlers are coming across. I hope the Tommies are good swimmers."
Gerhard Engel, Army Adjutant to Hitler.
The British Army? I saw 6 or 7 dead Negroes and maybe 20 or 30 other dead. The mass of the British Army got to the other side unharmed. They left their weapons behind and escaped. Erhard Milch, General of Aviators, to Hermann Göring.
Diary, June the 8th, 1940. I anticipate that Italy will come in now. It is a hard time for all who care for freedom. Neville Chamberlain, Lord President of the Council.
Fascist Italy does not participate in the war against Poland or Western and Northern Europe, but Mussolini wants to benefit from Hitler's victories and get a share of fame and booty. On June the 10th, 1940, Benito Mussolini declares war on France and Britain.
Italians. At that memorable meeting in Berlin, I said that if someone has a friend, he marches with him to the end, according to the laws of fascist morality. And that is what we have done with Germany, with its people, with its victorious armed forces.
Diary, Friday, June the 11th, 1940. And what is the secret of this victory? Surely the immense dynamism of the Führer. Eduard Wagner, Artillery General.
Diary, Friday, June the 14th, 1940. News at 1 o'clock at night. Paris occupied by our troops without a fight. Flag raised for 3 days. Henrietta Schneider.
Letter to William S. Slam, Courier, Portugal, end of June 1940. It was confirmed everywhere that the surrender of Paris had been a demoralizing factor. From that day on, according to one officer, the Germans couldn't advance as fast as the French fled. Friedrich Thorberg, born 1908 as Friedrich Ephraim Cantor Berg, Austro-Czech writer.
Adam Cherniakov, head of the Jewish Council of the Warsaw Ghetto. Diary, June the 17th, 1940. Jews will be evicted from public housing. Rumors yesterday that all of France has collapsed.
France offered a ceasefire on June the 17th. I've never seen Hitler as happy as on that day. Heinz Linger, valet to Adolf Hitler.
France's peace offer was submitted to him while he stood surrounded by his officers. He slapped his thigh in a lively gesture. We were to one side and observed the scene that Walter Franz also filmed. Christa Schröder, he was my boss.
Heinrich Hoffmann. Keitel, who was carried away by an outburst of emotion, coined the fatal phrase,
My Führer, you are the greatest military commander of all time.
Part of Hitler's growing self-deification after the first military successes involved believing it himself. Franz Halder.
Charles de Gaulle radio broadcast on the BBC to France, June the 18th, 1940. Is defeat final? No, for France is not alone. She is not alone. She has a vast empire behind her. She can align with the British Empire that holds the sea and continue the fight. She can, like England, use without limit the immense industry of the United States. I say this is not a Franco-German war to be decided by a single battle. I, General de Gaulle, currently in London, invite officers and French soldiers who are located in British territory to put themselves in contact with me. Whatever happens, the flame of the French resistance must not be extinguished and will not be extinguished.
In the Western Campaign, 50,000 soldiers of the German army die. More than 1.2 million soldiers from France, Great Britain, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and Belgium are captured.
Memoirs in diary form, June the 20th, 1940. Führer insisted that Breker and other artists and town planners come to the Führer headquarters. Even if those concerned don't understand questions of warfare and politics, they are still essential for the development of German art. Gerhard Engel.
June the 23rd, 1940. Hitler sheds light on my reason for being here.
I intend to drive to Paris with you, Speer, and Giesler.
A motorcade is waiting for us. Hitler sits next to the chauffeur in the first open car. I'm behind him. Next to me, Speer and Giesler. Paris is deserted. Dead. Not a soul in sight. This morbid impression seems to depress Hitler as well. Speechless, cramped, he cowers in his seat until we stop at the steps of the opera. Arno Breker, sculptor and architect.
It was my life's dream to see Paris. I can't tell you how happy I am that it has been fulfilled today.
For a moment, I felt sorry for him. 3 hours in Paris, the last and only time, made him happy, as if he was at the height of his success. Albert Speer.
Letter to Elizabeth Wagner, June the 29th, 1940. Yesterday I was in Paris. The city is coming alive again, if only a little, but it's something. It really is a magical place. The Führer was in Paris incognito the day before yesterday at 5 a.m. at Speer. I think he'll tear down Berlin after his impressions of this city. Eduard Wagner.
Eva Braun, who never appears in public, films the arrival of Adolf Hitler and his entourage in Berlin from a window of the Reich Chancellery. A large crowd of hundreds of thousands have waited for the Führer for 6 hours to give him an overwhelming reception.
Hitler was at the height of his power. He was the master of Europe. Gustav Mannerheim, Field Marshal of Finland.
Resistance to Hitler lost considerable ground in May and June 1940. Hitler's prestige had risen further. Ernst von Weizsäcker, State Secretary of the Foreign Ministry.
The mood at home also changed. The initial anxiety was replaced by radiant self-confidence. When the victory fanfare rang out, even old opponents of Hitler could not hide their joy. I also began to believe in the good outcome of the war. Lutz Graf Schwerin von Krosigk, Finance Minister.
The Hitler mystique was beyond analyzing. There was magic about the man. The gods or lot must have been totalitarian, for they or it loved this man. He never lost. He was predestined to win, or so it seemed. Howard K. Smith, correspondent of CBS in Berlin, 1940 to 1941.
Valley M., schoolgirl, Frankfurt am Main. One evening a week, we were allowed to listen to the German Army Request Program. We always looked forward to this, and our favorite songs were Lili Marleen and The Lullaby from Annelie. But we also listened to Bomben auf England.
The Atlantic coast, from the North Cape to the Spanish border, was in the hands of the Germans. The British Army was defeated and had fled the mainland with no weapons. The airspace on the continent was under German control. An invasion of Great Britain seemed under preparation. Ernst von Weizsäcker.
There were frequent visits by leading dignitaries. The Japanese always brought the most wonderful gifts. I can remember once there was a really old sea chart on which one could see how to walk from the mainland to Great Britain without getting one's feet wet. Rohush Mish, SS Bodyguard Regiment.
A stay of a few days in the English capital was all that was needed to recognize the difference between London and Paris. Here, no one was considering capitulation. Julius Deutsch, Austrian socialist of Jewish descent, in exile. Memoirs.
It was only after France had been flattened out that Britain, thanks to her island advantage, developed out of the pangs of defeat and the menace of annihilation a national resolve equal to that of Germany. Winston Churchill.
Diary, Saturday, July the 20th, 1940. Hitler spoke in the Reichstag, made an offer of peace to England. Henrietta Schneider.
Diary, August the 20th, 1940. Winston gave a great speech in the House of Commons. He speaks excellently. He does not brag too much. Harold Nicholson, Member of Parliament, National Labour Party.
The gratitude of every home in our island, in our empire, and indeed throughout the world, except in the abodes of the guilty, goes out to the British airmen who, undaunted by odds, unwearied in their constant challenge and mortal danger, are turning the tide of the world war by their prowess and by their devotion. Never, in the field of human conflict, was so much owed by so many to so few. Winston Churchill.
On August the 24th, 1940, the first bombs fall on London. Despite the fact that German bomber forces are 10 times larger and Allied planes have to fly 6 times further, Winston Churchill orders the immediate bombing of Berlin. On the night of August the 25th, 81 English bombers start out, 29 of which reach their target. More night raids follow. The attacks do not fail to have an effect on Hitler. On September the 4th, he announces his intention to wipe out London. As Goering's Air Force concentrates its bombing raids on the capital, the English aerial defences have a chance to catch their breath.
We had our first big air raid of the war last night. The Berliners were stunned. They did not think it could happen. When this war began, Goering assured them that it couldn't. The Berliners are a naive and simple people. William Shirer, U.S. journalist.
Basic training for men born in 1923 at the Fighter Squadron of Air Regiment 2 in Klagenfurt in Carinthia. Carinthia is a Reichsgau in Austria, which is now called Ostmark in the Greater German Reich. More than 1.3 million of the Austrian male population of approximately 7 million are drafted into the Wehrmacht and the Waffen-SS between 1939 and 1945. 242,000 Austrians are killed in action. That is about 8% of the male population, while in the Old Reich it is more than 30%. The governments of Canada, Australia, New Zealand and South Africa formally request that the royal family, or at least the 2 young princesses, be brought to safety in order to protect the crown, regardless of the fate of the motherland.
The children won't go without me, I won't leave without the king, and the king will never leave. Queen Elizabeth, Queen Consort of King George VI.
There is a time to live and a time to die. Winston Churchill.
Memoirs in diary form, November the 4th, 1940, Reich Chancellery. An unpleasant meeting at headquarters attended by Goering, von Brauchitsch, Keitel. Due to English and other press reports, Führer for the first time doubts the successes of the Luftwaffe and the strike figures. Führer visibly depressed. Have the impression that he doesn't know how to proceed. Gerhard Engel.
The gent has taken off his clothes and put on his bathing suit, but the water is getting colder, and there is an autumn nip in the air. Winston Churchill.
The day after Italy's declaration of war, the 7th British Tank Division was transferred to the Libyan frontier. We were not exactly the most modern force on Earth. Some of our armored cars were old Rolls-Royce Silver Ghosts, used by Lawrence of Arabia in the First World War. But we quickly took one border post after another. Dennis Avey, Private, 2nd Rifle Battalion. November the 17th, 1940. We gathered close to the Libyan frontier, 40 miles south of the sea, in a forbidding but now familiar landscape of sand and gravel. At 0600 hours the next morning, November the 18th, we cut through the wire and set off. All around, we could see tanks and other vehicles streaming across the desert towards Tobruk. Dennis Avey.
On December the 10th, the Italians suffered a severe defeat in Africa at Sidi Barrani. Marshal Graziani begged for German air support. Mussolini considered asking the Germans to send 2 tank divisions to Libya. German troops under Rommel got the situation under control. Heinz Guderian.
But now a new figure sprang upon the world stage. Rommel took charge of the growing German contingent. He strove immediately to enforce an offensive campaign. His ardor and daring inflicted grievous disasters upon us. But he deserves the salute which I made him in the House of Commons in January 1942, when I said of him, "We have a very daring and skillful opponent against us, and, may I say, across the havoc of war, a great general." Winston Churchill.
The next day, November the 20th, we buried my friend, Bill Manley. Dear old Bill. It was towards first light when we buried him. I got on my knees, pulled as much sift sand away as I could, trying to prevent it trickling back into the shallow grave. We removed 1/2 of the dog tag from around his neck and dropped him into a shallow dent in the desert. I tried not to look at his face as I pushed the sand back over him. I left him somewhere in the shifting sands, south of Sidi Rezé. Dennis Avey.
Diary Berlin, December 1st, 1940. For most Germans, this is an end in itself. For to be strong in their scheme of life is to be all. It is the emergence of the primitive tribal instinct of the early German pagans of the vast forests of the north, to whom brute strength was not only the means, but the end of life. It is this primitive racial instinct of blood and soil which the Nazis have reawakened in the German soul. William Shirer.
Paris in November 1940. The defeat of France leads to a partition of the country under the Armistice of Compiègne, the German garrison headquarters on Place de l'Opéra. Under the German occupation, the Parisian cityscape changes. The German soldiers have their own cinemas, cafes, and about 60 brothels. The Guard regiment marches along the Champs-Élysées to the garrison headquarters. Northern France, Paris, and the entire Atlantic coast are subject to a German occupying regime. From July 1940, the south, over 40% of France, and the colonies are managed by a new French government based in Vichy, which pursues a course of limited collaboration with the Germans.
The Führer and the Supreme Commander of the German Army, the Führer headquarters, absolutely top secret, for officers only, 9 copies, 2nd copy, order number 21, Operation Barbarossa. Even before the end of the war against England, the German army has to be prepared to overthrow Soviet Russia in a quick campaign, Operation Barbarossa. The bulk of the Russian army in Western Russia should be destroyed in bold operations via tank pincer movements in order to prevent the withdrawal of strong combat units into the expanses of the Russian interior. Adolf Hitler.
Memoirs in diary form, December the 18th, 1940. The order for Barbarossa has been issued. The Army Supreme Commander has ordered us to find out whether the Führer wants armed engagement or is just bluffing. In my opinion, Führer himself still doesn't know how to proceed. He hopes the English will capitulate and doesn't believe the USA will enter the war. Gerhard Engel.
In September 1939, the Wehrmacht and the Red Army determined the line of the border in occupied eastern Poland on the basis of the Hitler-Stalin Pact. Stalin's Soviet Union strictly adheres to the agreement and supplies raw materials to the German Reich. In the next 1.5 years, there will be no conflict along the now 2,000-kilometer-long border.
Diary, Wednesday, January the 1st, 1941. We heard the Führer's message to the German people on the radio, wonderful and full of confidence in victory. Willem Zig also came, and we ended up playing a cosy game of skat. Henrietta Schneider.
On February the 18th, 1941, we drove from Berchtesgaden to Hitler's house on Obersalzberg. Hitler greeted us in the entrance hall with the tree of Untersberg. Here, Hitler spoke. For 1.25 hours, he gave a summary of the development of the armored tank. He concluded his talk about tank characteristics by saying, what's most important? Armament second most important, and armor a distant third. His opinion, in a nutshell, was,
the tank is not an insurance policy.
Walter Roland, industrialist, commissioner for tank production in Ministry of Armaments and War Production.
At the beginning of April 1941, the motorized flak regiments 19 from Kitzingen and 6 from Hamburg were relocated from France and Belgium to Bulgaria. In the foothills of the Rila and Pirin mountains, watched by Bulgarian troops, a football match between the regiment's first batteries takes place. Tsar Boris III visits the troops. 6 weeks earlier, the Kingdom of Bulgaria joined the Axis Pact of Germany, Italy and Japan, and the Wehrmacht was allowed to station its forces in the Balkan state. Bulgaria will take part in the war against Yugoslavia and Greece, but never declares war on the Soviet Union in the Second World War.
Hitler regards the Serbs as the most effective at nation-building and thus the most dangerous people in the Balkans. Milovan Djilas, Yugoslavian communist from Montenegro. Memoirs.
Diary, April the 5th, 1941. Very early on Saturday morning, the attack on Yugoslavia and Greece is to begin. In Greece, we will try to reach Thessaloniki as quickly as possible. Yugoslavia will also be attacked by Bulgaria and Hungary. The state will be broken up. Italy will be given the coast, Bulgaria, Macedonia, and our Bavarian Eastern March areas are to receive the former Austrian provinces. Josef Goebbels.
Germany declares war on Yugoslavia. Similarities to statements made before the invasions of Poland, Norway, Belgium and Holland. The German troops have been ordered to restore order in the Balkans, said Hitler. The Serbs will offer resistance, but for how long? At the moment, the Wehrmacht is attacking Yugoslavia and Greece. Details are not known, but we should have further news by tonight. Michael Sebastian, Romanian Jewish journalist.
Weather as yesterday, a little cloudier at lunchtime and still cold. Thessaloniki occupied by the Germans. Otto Blumenthal.
Diary. Easter Monday, April the 14th, 1941. The position in Libya becomes worse, and Egypt is threatened. In the Balkans, the Yugoslavs are going to collapse, and as the Greeks have not withdrawn their Albanian divisions, our Greek position rendered untenable. Robert Menzies, Prime Minister of Australia.
Generalfeldmarschall Keitel überbringt die Glückwünsche des Führerhauptquartiers.
Diary, Monday, April the 21st, 1941. Yesterday, the Führer celebrated his birthday on the Balkan front. Henrietta Schneider.
Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring trifft ein. Der Reichsmarschall überbringt dem Führer die Glückwünsche der Wehrmacht.
Hitler's invasion allowed suppressed century-old darkness to rise again, in a new guise and with new motivation. No nation is free of similar phenomena. Neighbors had lived peacefully next to neighbors, and both would have continued their whole lives long, like their grandfathers. But now they're looting and wiping each other out. Milovangelas.
New Year's Eve 1942. A man in Dessau lights the last cigar of peace. Unlike in the First World War, thanks to the plundering of occupied territories, people in the Greater German Reich do not starve during the Second World War.
Diary, April the 24th, 1941. Some shortages in Berlin, above all tobacco and beer. I'll fix this. The people have to be kept happy. Joseph Goebbels, Gauleiter of Berlin.
Radio address on the BBC, April the 27th, 1941. The peoples of the British Empire and of the United States are determined that the cause of freedom shall not be trampled down. Last time I spoke to you, I quoted the lines of Longfellow. I have some other lines which are less well known, but which are appropriate to our fortunes tonight. And I believe they will be so judged wherever the English language spoken or the flag of freedom flies. For while the tired waves vainly breaking seem here no painful inch to gain, far back through creeks and inlets making comes silent, flooding in the main, and not by eastern windows only. When daylight comes in the light. In front, the sun climbs slow, how slowly. But westward look, the land is bright. Winston Churchill.
Diary, May the 27th, 1941. Report. I have never believed and cannot see how the British Empire can defeat Germany without the help of God or Uncle Sam. Perhaps it will take both. General Raymond E. Lee, Chief of U.S. Military Intelligence in Great Britain.
My next-door neighbour says she prays to God to strike Hitler dead. Cannot help thinking, if God wanted to do that, he would not have waited till Mrs. Helm asked him to do so. Nella Last, Barrow in Furness, Lancashire, Diary. Up until 1942, he needed particular decorum and big rooms to think about important diplomatic activities or to plan offensives. Christa Schröder, Hitler's private secretary.
In the living hall of the Berghof, there was a large globe. An army adjutant pointed meaningfully to a pencil line running from north to south in the Urals. Hitler had drawn the line to identify the future boundary of the spheres of influence that were agreed with the Japanese. Albert Speer, Memoirs.
Letter to US President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Describing Hitler and Germany, Mr. Stalin spoke that the Germans were a people who, without a second's thought, would sign a treaty today, break it tomorrow, and sign a second one the following day. Harry Hopkins, Moscow.
Hans Halder, Major General, War Diary. Devastating verdict on Bolshevism. Is equal to antisocial criminality. Communism, tremendous danger for the future. We must distance ourselves from the attitude of soldierly camaraderie. The communist is no comrade beforehand and no comrade afterwards. It is a battle of extermination. Eradication of communist intelligence.
I had a belief in the foresight and wisdom of the German General Staff that was hard to shake. And I could not credit that these strategically and tactically trained minds would embark on a two-front war if they thought they were not sure that the Blitzkrieg technique would lead to victory. I thought it likely that it would lead to the end of Russia, as it had come to the end of France. I was wrong. Karl Zuckmayer, German-Austrian dramatist in British exile.
Diary, Monday, June the 9th, 1941. There's a big operation here. The streets are full of military of every kind on their way to the border. Henrietta Schneider, Elk, East Prussia.
When he decided on the Eastern Campaign in the summer of 1941, he told Eva Braun he had to travel to Berlin for a few days. Christa Schröder.
When Adolf heard the music of Wagner, he was transformed. Then he lost his fierceness. He became quiet, flexible, manageable. The unease disappeared from his face. What had moved him during the day vanished. August Kubitschek, childhood friend.
Wagner's music became second nature to him. Ernst Hamstein, until 1937, head of the NSDAP Foreign Press Bureau.
He loved the Wagner opera the most. Other than that, symphonies by Beethoven and Bruckner, or songs by Richard Strauss. Of the light entertainment pieces, he appreciated The Bat and The Merry Widow. Bormann proved his musical knowledge just by changing the records. Heinrich Hoffmann, photographer.
Für mein Maul Eseltier.
It was almost always the same repertoire that Hitler had them play.
Amigo mio, schau, sie wackelt mit langem Ohr.
The only popular song Hitler allowed was the Donkey Serenade, which often concluded the concert.
Mein kleines Eselfräulein, ein Esel bin auch ich und darum verstehst du mich.
Gertraud Traudl-Junge, Hitler's private secretary.
In the near future, it'll be the victory fanfare for our Russian campaign. How do you like it? Adolf Hitler to Albert Speer after listening to the first part of your Prelude by Frank Smith. The Russian fanfare, June 21st, 1941.
Diary, Saturday, June the 21st, 1941. Wild rumours are coming from the border. Henrietta Schneider.
On the evening of June the 21st, the Chief of Staff of the Kiev Military District called and said that a German sergeant had defected to the border guards. He claimed the German troops were moving into their staging areas for an attack that would begin early on June the 22nd. I notified Stalin immediately. Georgy Zhukov, Chief of Staff of the Red Army.
It's always a strange feeling before battle. The mood is like at a party. Horst Rochow, Kassel, Regimental Doctor in the 24th Tank Regiment of the 24th Tank Division.
War Diary of the Army Group North, June the 22nd, 1941. Beginning of the invasion, 3:05 a.m. The entire front of the Army Group crossed the border. Robert Freiherr von Griesenbeck, Major.
It was June the 22nd, 1941. The night was wonderfully warm and full of the scent of flowers. The nightingales sang like never before. Then it struck 1, 2, 3 o'clock. And it remained deadly quiet. In the next few seconds, artillery fire erupted and the earth threatened to explode. Anita von Goldammer, Molchishkiai, Memel District.
Around 4:10 a.m., the West and Baltic military districts announced the beginning of the German offensive in their territory. Around 4:30 a.m., all members of the Politburo had assembled. Stalin looked pale at the table, pipe in hand. I suggested that all military districts on the border immediately employ all means against the enemy troops that had broken through and stop their continued advance. Not stop them, destroy them, Timoshenko stated more precisely. Give the order, Stalin said. Georgy Zhukov.
Is he mad, this Hitler? He could have allied himself with England's Chamberlain against communist Russia, or with communist Russia against the Anglo-Saxon capitalist world. But he invaded both. Yes, he is mad. Thank God. Klaus Mann, son of Katja and Thomas Mann, a life's report. Hitler sends us to Russia to conquer subhumans. But now I see Russia the way it is. The endless expanses, gently rising hills, occasionally a village with always the same one-story farmhouses. Then the only building made of stone, a church with a classical tower to one side. The land of farmers, the land of monks. Otto Eicher, soldier.
With endless grain and wheat fields and giant sunflower forests as a backdrop, I now experience the war in the precision of its metallic order, in the steel lights of its machinery, in the unceasing uniform roar of 1,000 engines. Garzia Malaparte, author and war correspondent of the Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera, the Volga rises in Europe.
With the exception of Falsenest in the Eifel region, Hitler's headquarters all had names that appeared with the word Wolf, Wolf, Schanzer, Wer Wolf, Wolf schluckt. Heinrich Hoffmann.
Christa Schröder. It all began so promisingly. In the first 2 days in the Wolfschanze, we experienced the boss standing in front of a large map of Europe and pointing to Moscow, saying,
"In a few weeks we'll be in Moscow, there's no doubt about that. And then I'll raise Moscow to the ground. I'll build a reservoir there. The name Moscow has to be erased completely." Adolf Hitler, quoted by Secretary Christa Schröder.
Type of warfare completely different to the German plan. Right from the beginning, with the absence of solid fronts and secured flanks. At first unpleasant for the army, today it has solid flanks. War, but without structure. Führer says you have to read Karl May to get inside him. No more information about our own and Russian strengths. Everything uncertain. Security of the Führer by no means absolute. Admits he's been terrified at times, but always strong when the going gets tough. Walter Scherf, Captain, Führer's Commissioner for Military Historiography.
The Request concert, broadcast every Sunday afternoon on the radio, was popular with young and old. When Wilhelm Strins, with his wonderful voice, sang Homeland Your Stars, you could have heard a pin drop. Eleonora V., born 1924, restaurant owner.
Wilhelm Keitel, Chief of the Armed Forces High Command, to Field Marshal Fedor von Bock on July the 25th, 1941. The speedy collapse of Russia is vital for German interests, since Russia cannot be subjugated. The Führer was concerned about this situation and asked, worriedly,
"How much time do I have left to finish off Russia? And how much time do I still need?"
August the 28th, 1941. Meeting of Mussolini and Hitler at the front near Uman, south of Kiev.
Russia, Army Group South, letter 1941. It is our war, not as the enemy propaganda likes to call it, Hitler's war. They don't know that Hitler's one of us, a soldier like us. We know that he would do everything in his power for us. That gives us unlimited trust. The Führer leaves no comrade in the lurch, and when he doesn't help, it's because there was something more important. Horst Rochow, regimental doctor from Kassel.
When Mussolini visited the Russian front, he was really impressed by the contact between the German officers and their soldiers. Hitler and he ate together with simple soldiers, and they had the same food. Rachele Mussolini, Memoirs.
Recording of the leave-taking from Hitler of the Italian ambassador Bernardo Attolico and his wife. The Führer replied that he had always advocated German-Italian friendship. Besides, there was also a personal element to this. In Mussolini, he treasured a great contemporary to whom he was bound through a deep personal affection. Should anything happen to Mussolini, then the Führer would feel really isolated.
Pachenko, September 1941. Ever onwards, deep into the Russian continent. To the Bug, the Dnieper, the Donetsk, the Don, the Volga, to the Caspian Sea. And then winter will come, the lovely winter, and then dust and rain again, dust and mud, until the winter comes again, the lovely winter of Holy Russia. Curzio Malaparte, the Volga rises in Europe.
Diary, September the 9th, 1941. In the evening Führer's table. Führer, we Germans like only Finland, possibly Sweden, and of course England. A German-English alliance would be an alliance from people to people. The English just have to keep their hands off the continent. Their empire in the world they can keep. Walter Havel, Ambassador and SS Oberführer, representative of the Foreign Office with the Führer.
I say this here today because I can say it today. This enemy is already crushed and will never rise again. Adolf Hitler, speech on the occasion of the opening of the War Winter Relief Drive on October the 3rd, 1941.
At the front, which was then near Smolensk, I made the acquaintance of what the Russians call General Mud. We travelled to the front through deep, tenacious mud, which reminded me of maple syrup turned to glue. We drove through battlefields that looked like the end of the world. Margaret Burke-White, documentary photographer of Life magazine.
Diary, October the 10th, 1941, 11:30 p.m. It's snowing in Russia now, something we can't deal with well. Eduard Wagner, Artillery General.
There is a winter, you know, in Russia. For a good many months, the temperature is apt to fall very low. There is snow, there is frost, and all that. Hitler forgot about this Russian winter. He must have been very loosely educated. We all heard about it at school, but he forgot it. Winston Churchill.
Near the undamaged village, a dozen white crosses of acacia wood stand at the roadside. I stop to decipher the names of the fallen soldiers. All young men between 20 and 25. Curzio Malaparte, Shantabani in Bessarabia.
Diary, Sunday, November the 23rd, 1941. Partly cloudy, still mild. Morning, church, commemoration of the dead. Text, I am the resurrection and the life. More heavy fighting in Libya. Otto Blumenthal, Jewish-German mathematician, trashed.
Diary, November the 29th, 1941. A dark day today. Frau Wedig brought the sad news that Helmut Wilmensig was killed in action on November the 3rd, near Petersburg. Dr. Müller wrote me that his eldest son had fallen in the east on October the 28th. Henrietta Schneider.
Lunch with de Gaulle at Connaught Hotel. De Gaulle says he doesn't think the Germans will take Moscow. Harold Nicholson, diary. Journal, December the 7th, 1941. I lunched with the President today in the Oval Office. We were talking about things far removed from war when Secretary Knox called to say they had picked up a radio message from Honolulu, from the Commander-in-Chief of our forces there, advising all our stations that an air raid attack was in progress and that it was no drill. I said I thought that surely Japan would not attack in Honolulu. At 2:28, Admiral Stark called the President and confirmed the attack. Churchill rang from England. The President told him that we were now all in the same boat. Harry Hopkins, advisor to President Roosevelt. Roosevelt has ordered the mobilization of American forces. The news makes me feel numb. Harold Nicholson, diary.
We cannot lose the war. We now have an ally that has not been defeated in 3,000 years. Adolf Hitler to Walter Hevel on December the 8th, 1941.
Diary, Thursday, December the 11th, 1941. Around 3 o'clock, we listened to the Führer from the Reichstag. The war with America is also official now. The Führer will make sure everything turns out well. Henrietta Schneider.
Diary, Ulrich von Hassel, diplomat and member of the German resistance. It's no time for jokes anymore, but stories from the comic character Graf Bobby describe the situation. Graf Bobby looks at the globe and is told the big green region is Russia. The red parts are the British Empire. The light purple is the USA. And the yellow is China, all huge areas. And the little blue one? That's Germany. Does the Führer know how small it is?
When Pearl Harbor converted the issue into a struggle for survival, the United States produced the fighting machine that played an indispensable role in beating Germany to its knees. Dwight D. Eisenhower, Assistant Chief of Staff, U.S. Army.
I experienced how a democracy created a war machine in a few months. Overnight, factory directors and bank managers, civilian technicians, engineers and tradesmen turned into captains and majors, colonels and generals. Julius Deutsch, Austrian Social Democrat in U.S. exile. Memoirs.
December the 12th. I want to join the American Army. Klaus Mann.
When the German army, surprised by the terrible winter of 1941-42, got stuck in the Russian ice and snow, Hitler was frequently depressed. But as before, he hoped for a quick victory.
There is only a very thin veil that we have to penetrate. We have to be patient. The Russian resistance will not hold.
Christa Schröder.
On December the 17th, I visited the generals commanding the 14th and 47th Tank Corps, as well as the 7th Army Corps, to again learn about the condition of the troops. The three generals reported that the troops were beginning to have doubts about the high command. Black ice making all movement difficult. The Russians are prepared and equipped for winter, and we have nothing. Heinz Guderian, Colonel General.
Franz Halder, War Diary, December the 17th, 1941. Midnight, summoned to the Führer.
Disengagement is out of the question. The enemy has only made deep incursions in a few places. Setting up a rear echelon is illusory. The front is suffering in only one respect. The enemy has more soldiers. He has no more artillery. He is much worse off than we are. Adolf Hitler, oral order to Army Group Center, December the 16th, 1941. Commanders, unit leaders and officers are to take personal steps to force troops to engage in fanatical resistance to hold their position, without regard to enemy breakthroughs on the flank or in the rear. Only with this kind of warfare can we gain the time necessary to get reinforcements from the homeland and the West that I have ordered.
The categorical order not to retreat, combined with Hitler's enormous prestige, but also the terror of his ruling apparatus, have a decisive impact on military performance, with fewer troops and weapons, in stabilizing the German front line and holding the combat effectiveness of the Wehrmacht intact.
Napoleon said in 1812, "The cold has been my ruin." Hitler's determination mastered the situation. His steadfastness warded off doom. Otto Dietrich, head of press of the NSDAP.
Diary, Monday, December the 22nd, 1941. The Führer announces that he has taken over command of the entire army. What are the grounds for this? Dear Müller thanked me for my sympathy about the loss of his son in action. Henrietta Schneider.
The Russians have smashed Hitler's greatest army in the world. Hitler dismisses his generals and takes command himself. Bertolt Brecht, German writer in exile.
Diary, December the 31st, 1941. Bad news from the front. In the evening saw the Führer. Subdued atmosphere. Führer said, "I'm glad to be able to solve large problems. May 1942 bring me as much luck as 1941 has. The worries can stay. Difficult times have always served as preparation for significant events." Listen to Bruckner's Seventh Symphony. Walter Havel.
Diary, January the 11th, 1942. How meek our military communiques have become. Friedrich Kellner, Laubach.
Adolf Hitler. Order for retreat to the East Army, January the 15th, 1942. This is the first time in this war that I will give the order to retreat along a large front position. I expect this retreat to take place in a form worthy of the German army. The troops' feeling of superiority over the enemy and the fanatical will to inflict the maximum damage must also dominate the retreat.
January the 18th and 19th, 1942, near Uranach on the River Tim. Our permanently cold feet hurt. Every step is torture, but we have to walk and move our limbs. Every incidence of frostbite could be interpreted as self-mutilation. Willi Peter Rehse, private.
Karl Töth, stenographer in the Führer headquarters, diary, review of military situation. While we were alone with the Führer, he addressed us. It was very cold in the room, and in his concern for us, he said we must be freezing, and he would therefore have a heater put under our seats. He said he couldn't tolerate the warmth himself, and got a headache when he leant over the maps on the table.
On the 11th of February 1942, Marshal Ion Antonescu visits the Wolfschanze headquarters. The Romanian leader takes part in the daily status report. Insiders refer to these meetings as a show.
During the journey to Hitler's headquarters, I have written the protocols of my discussion in Görlitz Forest and recorded my general impressions. The atmosphere is depressing. Perhaps the atmosphere of the damp forest and the discomfort of communal living in the barracks are contributing to the bad news. The anterooms are full of people smoking, eating and talking away. The smell of the kitchen, uniforms, heavy boots. Everything is for the most part superfluous, at least for a great number of people who don't need to be here. Galeazzo Ciano, Foreign Minister of the Kingdom of Italy. Diary.
But the burden of work and increasing concerns from setbacks in the course of the war eroded Hitler's health. From the winter of 1941-1942 onwards, Morel monitored him day and night. In the end, Hitler began having mysterious injections almost every day. Christa Schröder, Hitler's private secretary.
Diary, Berlin, March the 3rd, 1942. The hallmarks of the situation. Further erosion of the German forces in Russia. Slow, further deterioration of the economic and food situations in Germany. Ulrich von Hassel.
Dwight D. Eisenhower, Chief of the War Plans Division of the U.S. General Staff. In the late winter of 1941-42, the U-boat campaign in the Atlantic was at almost the height of its effectiveness. We were monthly losing ships, including valuable tankers, by the score. A typical month was March 1942, when we lost in the Atlantic and Arctic areas 88 Allied and neutral ships. Simultaneously, we needed every type of fighting vessel, cargo, and personnel ship.
Particularly when it comes to the ordinary German woman, the housewife with whom one speaks on the street and in the shops, one gets the feeling that despite all prohibitions, she continues to keep her own life pretty well intact. Karen Blixen, reporting for the Politiken newspaper, Copenhagen.
In 1941, more than 600,000 soldiers from Italy, Croatia, Slovakia, Romania and Hungary march eastwards with the Wehrmacht. Romania plans to recapture Bessarabia from the Soviet Union, and Hungary wants Hitler's support in the territorial conflicts with its neighbours. Slovakia and Croatia are vassal states of the German Reich.
May the 20th, 1942. We met many of our allies, some of whom made a very good impression. Spaniards, Slovaks, Hungarians. Horst Rochow, letter to his wife.
As the Wehrmacht can no longer offset its losses by recruiting in the Greater German Reich, Hitler urges his allies to provide larger troop contingents. In 1942, troop levels from the Allied states double in the east. The 4th of June 1942. Hitler flies to Finland to congratulate a man he thinks highly of on his birthday.
The Führer speaks out in great praise of Mannerheim. He is a terrific soldier. A shame that this brave nation is so small. Gerhard Engel, Army Adjutant to Hitler.
Field Marshal Kurt Mannerheim, who turns 75 years old today, is known as the Strong Man of Finland, which, as a brother-in-arms, has also been fighting the Soviet Union for 11 months and is supported by German divisions in the country. A recording exists of the talks between Hitler and Mannerheim, taped inadvertently by a Finnish radio technician. Witnesses remember Hitler's voice in a private setting as pleasantly warm. His deep baritone in guttural low Bavarian, the environment of his childhood, is totally different to the screaming shout of the orator Hitler, formed at a time without sound amplification.
Hätte ich im Jahre 39 Frankreich erledigt, dann wäre die Weltgeschichte anders gelaufen. Der 10. Mai war der erste schöne Tag. Am 10. Mai habe ich sofort angegriffen. Ich konnte im September oder Oktober mit unseren Waffen keinen Krieg mehr beginnen, das war ja unmöglich. Wir hatten auch den Aufmarsch im Osten in keiner Weise vorbereitet. Die Verbände mussten ja auch im Westen erst wieder konsolidiert werden, es musste erst die Bewaffnung in Ordnung gebracht werden.
Mannerheim's Finland will sign a separate ceasefire with the Soviet Union in September 1944.
Diary, Friday, July 4th, 1942. Few clouds, Temperature normal, slightly overcast at night. The Russian front breached along a 300-kilometer line. Otto Blumenthal, Utrecht.
After the victory over the Red Army at Kharkov on June the 28th, 1942, Hitler orders a major summer offensive. Due to the weakening of the Wehrmacht in the winter of 1941-42, the attack is limited to an 800-kilometer section in the area of the Army Group South. Hitler wants to conquer the Caucasian oil fields, reach the Caspian Sea, and push across the Caucasus to Persia. An encirclement of large formations of the Red Army, as during the attacks of 1941, fails. The Soviet troops withdraw strategically behind the Don-Volga line. Due to this rapid advance, Hitler gets the impression that the Red Army has lost decisive power. The conquest of the Crimea and advance to the Caucasus mark the greatest extent of Hitler's territorial dominion.
From Rostov-on-Don, several waves of retreats rolled through our area in the summer of 1942. The oil tanks were opened, wheat fields torched, all so that they wouldn't fall into the hands of the enemy. On August 3rd, 1942, German scouts surfaced on motorbikes. Within 3 days, German troops moved into Privolnoye. Soviet troops were scattered. But beyond Nalchik, barrier units worked to carry out Order N227 from Stalin. Not one step back. Mikhail Gorbachev, schoolboy.
July the 12th, 1942. It is becoming increasingly clear that military action will soon take place on the approach to Stalingrad. Alexei Chuyanov, first secretary of the party's Stalingrad Regional Committee.
War Diary, July the 30th, 1942, day 404. In the bow of the River Don, west of Stalingrad, the 6th Army of Army Group B is engaged in a fierce battle, and the situation is at present unclear. Franz Halder, Chief of the General Staff.
I wanted to come to the Volga, to a specific place and a specific city. Adolf Hitler, November the 8th, 1942.
Damn Hitler, who began this war. Damn all the generals, colonels, and military industrialists. Everyone who's to blame for this war and who wants it. A curse on this era. Willi Peter Reza, Corporal.
From Voronezh in the east to the Volga, the Soviet retreat had assumed the character of a disorderly flight. But an army of workers was waiting by the Volga. Curzio Malaparte, The Volga Rises in Europe, 1948.
Mother says, Father fell on August the 22nd. He volunteered to go to the front. He was sent to Verkhny Gniloy, northwest of Stalingrad. He was regimental commander when a shell fragment struck him in the head. He's dead. Ina next to me seems to shrink, as if becoming even smaller and thinner. Peter sobs. Mother doesn't cry. She says this seriously and soberly. Werber von Wedermeyer, born 1932.
On September the 11th, I was ordered to report to the frontline staff under Khrushchev. They told me to take over the 62nd Army. My orders were, defend Stalingrad. After I accepted the order, Nikita Khrushchev asked me, "How do you see this?" I said, I understand the order very well. I'll try to carry it out. Either I defend Stalingrad or I die doing so. I got in the car and drove to Stalingrad. Vasily Chuikov, Lieutenant General, the Stalingrad Protocols.
The high point of the war had been reached. Something unimaginable overpowered the wildest dreams. The North Cape, Pyrenees, Sahara and Volga formed the boundaries of a sphere of influence created overnight. For sure, there were bigger empires, but this one included Europe and its nations. There was no reason for joy. You knew what lay ahead for us because the disproportion of forces was obvious. Udo from Alvensleben, Army Captain, Diary.
Memories in diary form, October the 18th, 1942. Führer is in high spirits as the Red October tractor plant in Volgograd has been seized. Believes in early capture of all Stalingrad. Gerhard Engel, Army Adjutant to Hitler.
We knew that Hitler wouldn't stop and would keep throwing military forces at the front. But he sensed that it was not a battle for life being fought here, but rather a battle to the death. Vasily Chuikov, the Stalingrad Protocol.
I feel entitled to demand that every German soldier should sacrifice his life. Adolf Hitler to Heinz Guderian on December the 20th, 1940.
I have lost more than 4,000 men here. There were people dying, but my men didn't budge. Alexander Rodimtsev, commander, 13th Guards Rifle Division of the 62nd Army Group.
On October the 26th, 1942, Max is killed. He is a 20-year-old battalion adjutant. It looks as if this is too much for Mother to deal with. She is getting bitter. That's noticeable, even if she doesn't want to show it. We young ones say, now Father is not alone anymore. Verborg von Wedemeyer.
Diary. Sunday, November the 8th, 1942. The Führer spoke from the Munich Hofbräukeller. He laid into the war criminals again. The Americans landed in Algiers during the night. Monday, November the 9th, 1942. Landing of the Americans in Morocco. Henrietta Schneider.
Dr. Theo Morel, Adolf Hitler's personal physician, Diary, December the 15th, 1942. Patient A, sleeping badly because of the military situation. Profundal.
Through countless channels, the news trickles through about the catastrophic winter in the east. Visitors from every corner of Germany, new arrivals from the prisons, convicted soldiers, government officials on leave, all know and tell of the terror of the Russian Winter War. Rudi Goguel, communist, prisoner in Hamlin jail.
Up until the very end, the soldiers believed Hitler's promise that he would get them out of the encirclement. I knew that this was a terrible lie. Bernd Freitag von Loinghofen, Major.
Diary. Saturday, January the 23rd, 1943. No good news from the fronts. Tripoli abandoned. Henrietta Schneider.
From the west, the Americans marched to the outskirts of Tunis and dug in across from the German positions. It was clear that North Africa could not be held for much longer. Nikolaus von Below, Air Force Adjutant to Adolf Hitler.
Interrogation protocol of prisoner Hermann Strothmann, Lieutenant Adjutant of the 1st Battalion of the 79th Panzer Grenadier Regiment, born 1918 in Münster, Catholic. Men reached the limits of their endurance, and this limit was reached on February the 2nd. We surrendered spontaneously. Around 6 o'clock in the morning, I was told that Russian tanks had arrived. I began to cry, walked out of the shelter, and laid down my weapon.
Diary, February the 4th, 1943. We are now forced to communicate the loss of Stalingrad to the German people. We release the news with correspondingly heroic pomp. I coordinate all the details with the Führer personally, who agrees with my suggestions. Joseph Goebbels.
This news triggered excitement in me that exceeded everything that I'd gone through until then. For me, it was quite clear. The war is decided. The Allies will win. World history will retain its sense. Marie Yalovich Simon, a German Jew hiding in Berlin.
Erich von Manstein, General of the Army. Discussion on February the 6th, 1943. Hitler opened our meeting with the implicit recognition of his sole responsibility for the tragedy of the Sixth Army. I had the impression at the time that this tragedy caused more pain because it not only represented a blatant failure in his leadership, but that the fate of these soldiers really depressed him in a purely human way. Later, of course, doubts prevailed in me as to whether Hitler had ever had a heart for the soldiers.
At what point is one allowed to view the war as lost? As I see it, very late. Albert Speer, the Kranzberg Protocols.
Heinz Linger, valet to Adolf Hitler. Among Hitler's habits, which despite our efforts couldn't be remedied, was that he kept asking what time it was, above all, during the war.
Well, I principally only ever stop at 12:05. Adolf Hitler, in November 1942.